Despite all the great inductees we've heard from already, I have the best job of the evening, and that's to introduce the finest product ever to come from the state of Ohio. In a world where fake news and out-of-control hyperbole seems to be all the rage these days, what America certainly needs more of is simple, straight talk. Not straight talk, expressed nonsense like you might hear on Fox News. I'm talking about truth, honesty, integrity, despite what critics or those in power believe. Especially, this nominee, my friend, and first adult mentor, exemplifies that sentiment. And if you've spent any time with Jack Hartman at all, straight talk is the phrase of the day. If you don't doubt where you stand with Dr. Hartman, you'll know it for sure. And if you're afraid of constructive criticism, Jack Hartman might not be your cup of tea. And believe me, he is absolutely and completely fine. If I could think of one person to send to Washington these days to counter the attacks and defend the media from our current president and administration, it's Jack Hartman. Trump and it. The world today needs Jack Hartman more than it knows. And many of us here tonight benefited from his honesty and forthrightness at important formative times in our lives. You may be surprised to know that in his very active retirement as a professor here at Central Michigan University, he is a proud member of, wait for it, his local country club. Oh yeah, Dr. Hartman's in a country club, an actual country club. I'm told he regularly beats the pants off of many stuffy Republican members in straight sets. When I first met Jack Hartman, I was lost. I was on my third major, English, and wasn't sure what I could possibly do. I went to see him live and had written a few stories to see what I liked, and after they appeared, Jack came over from across the hall in the basement of Anspaugh Hall where his office was and encouraged me to select this as a career. Summoned me to his office and said to me, yeah, you're not that good. But you could be if you applied yourself and you worked it. Straight talk. So over time, as I grew and began to enjoy journalism, Dr. Hartman helped to guide and encourage me, pinning edited copy to the note card with my name on it in the basement of Anspaugh Hall, and occasionally giving me a kick in the pants when I focused more on life and less on the classroom. Eventually, when I selected journalism as a major, he was proud to sign it and help me finish my degree. Like Fred Human just regaled us with a few moments ago, everything I have, professionally, personally, is due in large part to Jack Hartman. I have a father, but Jack Hartman is the father who understood me. Even today, his lifetime education guarantee is something I avail myself of routinely. And when I don't, you can bet Hartman reaches out to me when he sees something that he catches my eye about one of my clients he likes and sometimes doesn't. I want to share for a moment praise of Dr. Hartman in the words of the people he valued the most while serving as a professor here, his students. I'm just going to read because these are great. I often forget that I never actually took one of John Hartman's classes. But when I reflect on the years in the Central Michigan University Journalism Program and at CMU Life, the people who shaped the writer and person I became, few were more impactful than Hartman. That's from Troy Remenick, 2004 graduate, columnist at the Traverse City Record Eagle, and arts correspondent for the Freeport. He's positively influenced so many alumni like myself with his constant urging to dig deeper, look further, and never be satisfied with the first answers to anything. As the father of 3 daughters and now grandchildren, he's a softie inside with a tough exterior. When my father passed away unexpectedly, shortly after my graduation from CMU, Dr. Hartman reached out to me with phone calls and reassurance, knowing what a young woman who was devastated needed to hear. That's Emily Garand, Vice President at MSU, and she's here tonight. He cared more about journalism and he cared more about his students, and not necessarily in that order. Students are first and foremost in his view because that's what education at CMU is all about. That's Steve Kuhn, class of '93. I won't waste any more time going through his biography because it's printed in your program and he would tell you that it's repetitive and nonsense. But I am going to share with you one paragraph from it that I know is important to him. And that's the last one. Dr. Hartman and his wife Kay, his childhood sweetheart, have been married for 51 years. They have, and I believe most, if not all, the families here tonight, but I'm going to name them all. They have 3 daughters, Kimberly and her husband Jeremy, Alicia and her husband Jason, and Jacqueline and her husband John, and 7 grandchildren: Isaac, Ian, Adam, Ella, Aiden, Samantha, and Paige. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the latest nominee and inductee for the Central Michigan University Hall of Fame, Dr. Jack Hartman.
Well, I wouldn't be here this evening if it wasn't for Ray Lockanemi and Richard Nixon. And I'll explain that in just a moment. First of all, I would like to make my contribution to the Ron Marmarella Scholarship Fund, if you would be kind enough to accept it. Second of all, I would like to congratulate the other nominees, the other inductees tonight. John Barnes' reputation precedes him. I don't know that we've ever met, but I know of you, and it's all phenomenal. Mary Schaefer, a former student of mine, there was very little doubt in my mind that she was going places when she was an undergraduate. And she has exceeded expectations, and she's still going strong. So and Fred and Sheila, haven't gotten acquainted, but your reputations are incredible, and I'm pleased to be in a group with you. I'm also privileged to have a number of former students who came back this evening for this event, many of them sitting at the 3 tables that we are looking after this evening, many others sitting at other tables, and many others that I heard from in the back, many others that I heard from. I received over 200 messages on Facebook. Almost exclusively from former students when this was announced 3 months ago. So it's rather remarkable, and I'm incredibly grateful to that. Now, my late father, Harvey Hamill Hartman, wanted me to be a great athlete, but when he figured out that probably wasn't going to be the case, except maybe in tennis, he decided maybe then I could be a great sports writer. So off I went to Bowling Green State University in 1963 to become a great sports writer. But about halfway through my undergraduate career, I started reading the front page before I read the sports page, and that's kind of what has continued in the past. And also, I got interested in a subject called politics. I sometimes tell people I suffer from the twin afflictions of journalism and politics. I first learned about CMU from Ray Lockanemi. Some of you know Ray. He was a journalism professor here 4 decades ago. Ray Lockanemi and I worked together at the Toledo Blade as copy editors. And he told me he couldn't say enough about CMU, what a wonderful place it was. He had to leave to get his PhD at Ohio University, and then became a professor at Bowling Green State University. So in 1984, or 1984 rather, when I saw an advertisement for a journalism professor job at Central Michigan University, I applied primarily on the strength of Ray Lockanemi's recommendation. And also because he said, Central Michigan University is still a great undergraduate journalism program. It hasn't sold out the graduate program. It hasn't watered down its program. It hasn't changed the mission. It is trying to prepare undergraduates for good jobs in journalism and related professions. And that's what I wanted to do. That was exactly what I wanted to do. That was exactly what I had experienced at Bowling Green State University in the 60s. And that, to me, was the correct mission. And then Richard Nixon entered the picture. Richard Nixon was forced to resign because of an investigation led by the Washington Post and other journalists that revealed the wrongdoing that he had done as president and forced him to resign. After that, young people wanted to go into journalism. Young men, young women flooded the journalism programs across the country. There weren't enough seats in the classrooms, and there weren't enough professors to teach. And so the need to hire a journalism professor at Central Michigan in 1984 was great. And that is how I got my job, thanks to Richard Nixon and Ray Lafayette. I don't know that my friend Ray Lafayette would like to be mentioned in the same sentence with Richard Nixon. The snow was still on the ground when I came for my interview in April of 1984, and I wondered if I'd lost my mind coming here to some dark Arctic wasteland. But the late, great, now Hall of Fame member, Tom Rood, the chairman of the Journalism Department at the time, took me under his wing, ignored my shortcomings, gave me unlimited encouragement, even rented me a room for my first 2 years here. By then, I had my PhD in hand. I was promoted to assistant professor, was getting the hang of my classes and the way CMU did things. 2 more years, and I was tenured and promoted to associate professor. I enjoyed good rapport with students and provided a lot of encouragement to CM lifers and began to feel my hopes as a professor. 2 more years, and I took a year-long sabbatical to write my first book about the national newspaper, USA Today. I returned to CMU in 1991, determined to keep working hard, but not all the time when I was in Mount Pleasant. I decided that I needed a little recreation and I would make a weekly trip to the on Wednesday nights, even though I thought that the television show Cheers about being pals with people at a bar was stupid. This was when I began to get my education about college students. It was one thing to chat with them in class, after class, or in the office. It was another to watch them in their natural habitat. Sometimes students would join me at my table. Other times I would sit and write poetry or whatever was on my mind in my reporter's notebooks. I have 27 of them. What the hell, I'm a reporter. I take notes, I write, and I try to make sense out of things. I compile my poetry, and I did a few poetry readings at a local coffee shop in my last 2 years on the faculty. My favorite is titled Another Blanking Building. My take on the propensity of college presidents and trustees to put their money into buildings instead of into the 2 most important groups on campus, students and faculty. When I returned to my sabbatical in 1991, I took advantage of being a tenured faculty member to start saying what I really thought. It is my belief that being a tenured faculty member is like being rich without the money. What I really thought was that CM life was ceasing to be a watchdog on the campus and becoming more of a lapdog. My views were not warmly received by some journalism students in my classes who were editing and writing for the paper. I often critiqued the paper at the beginning of class, and they increasingly did not like it. Part of the job of a journalism professor is to critique journalism. I believe then and I believe now. Of course I have a sharp-edged way of communicating that did not endear me. CM lifers, some began avoiding my classes, and a few either majored in something else so they wouldn't have to take classes from me. Some years I was at one with the CM lifers when they did their job and held the powers that be accountable, and other years not so much. I started my career with good relations with the university administration, but that ended in the 1990s when the trustees that were appointed seemed to be more interested in building and less interested in the students and the faculty. They seemed to view the faculty as liabilities and the students not as assets, but as revenue sources. Now, the decline of CMU probably began 4 decades ago when William B. Boyd left as president of CMU to become president of the University of Oregon. A few years later, he greenlighted the making of the movie Animal House in Eugene, Oregon, and cemented his role as an academic legend who believed in free speech and free expression. Imagine the direction he would have taken CMU if he had stayed as our president. 25 years ago, we were told that students were our customers and we were supposed to satisfy them. Not teach them necessarily, but make them happy. We were mistakenly transformed from an educational institution into a marketing institution. Journalism always has been underfunded and treated like a stepchild. And we have an oddity at CMU that the late Professor Dennis Jeffers once pointed out. He said we have 2 journalism schools at CMU at opposite ends of the 4th floor of Moore Hall. Once, both were booming. Now, not so much. Maybe to paraphrase the old song, we need to get together and love one another right now. None of us would be here if not for the efforts of Gil Meicknecht, the founder of the CMU Journalism Department, and for the efforts of Jim Wojcik, who has held the place together for more than 4 decades. And I would not be here if the chair in 1984, Tom Root, had not taken me under his wing and guided me through the tenure and promotion process. Rest in peace, Gil and Tom. Jim, keep on keeping on. We are all better for knowing and working with Ron Romarelli. I'm proud of the fact that when I was chair of the department, I hired him on several occasions to teach for us. He was a true gentleman and a true scholar, and I hope you will all join me in contributing to his scholarship fund. A special thank you to my colleague, Alice Tate. My former colleague, Harvey Gottlieb, and I recruited Alice in 1986, and we couldn't have been prouder of what she has accomplished and our role in doing her to Central Michigan University. And I thank her for her support of this honor that I'm receiving this evening. And my former colleague, Dave Weinstock. Where are you, Dave? I'm proud to have Dave Weinstock as my colleague for many years. There was no finer teaching of journalistic writing than Dave, and I thank him for his support in this matter. And then the students that wrote letters on my behalf: Troy Rymick, T.J. Buchholz, Emily Kirkin-Durant, Adam Graham, and Garrett Ellison, and my former colleague, John Palin. A tip of the hat also to my former student, Chad Livengood, a Michigan journalism legend at age 36, for shepherding me through the process, and for the other members of the selection committee. Also my thanks to former student Dave Clark and to Tricia Kures at CM Life for putting it all together. And I wish to acknowledge my former colleagues who keep the fires of journalism burning on the 4th floor of Moore Hall: Chair Tim Boudreau, Jaffe Yin, Sean Baker, Lori Brost, Alina Hertzakova, Kent Miller, Richard Wren, Ed Simpson, Steve Kuhn, Teresa Hernandez, Mike Marn, and Office Administrator Cindy Gall. It has always been my belief that the high calling of journalism starts with keeping the people in power honest and holding them accountable. It remains about gathering the facts and the truth and assembling them into an understandable whole to inform citizens about their government and current events and help the citizens make decisions about what is right and what is wrong, and eventually leading to their decisions at the ballot box. Despite all the misguided changes here, I tried to maintain true to my belief that CMU was the provider of a valuable undergraduate education, where faculty had generous office hours, and tried to encourage students to get well-rounded education that prepared them for a career and a meaningful life. I offered my students Dr. Hartman's unlimited lifetime warranty for career advice for the rest of their and my lives. I taught them my 2-2-2 plan for finding a job. I am still kicking, and I'm still fielding inquiries by phone, email, and Facebook from former students, even a few weeks short of my 73rd birthday. And thanks to the miracle of Facebook, I'm able to keep track of dozens of former students, including the more than 200 who belong to my site, Heartmaniacs.
Yeah!
This is a great joy to me because outside of my family and a few close friends, I consider my former students the source of my fortune. And I would like to also offer that career advice to current students at CMU. If you've got an email address that has CMish on it, dial me up, ask me your questions, and I'll give you the best answer I can. If I don't know the answer, I'll find someone who can. It would be my pleasure to do that for you. There are many good and crazy memories of my days in Mount Please Don't at Casino, Michigan University. Remember when I asked the students to quack at the beginning of class? One day they held back, and I shouted, "Quack, gosh darn it!" I would ask students if, in the words of the popular song, if they were strangers on a bus just trying to find their way home. About half of them would say yes, and the other half weren't sure. I regularly said, if you want to be popular, don't go into journalism. You will make both sides mad if you publish the truth. I would often say that Mr. and Mrs. Michigan were getting good value for their taxes and tuition dollars for their sons and daughters at CMU. And in the latter cell phone years, I would tell students that when their moms called after class to ask how it went, tell them that Dr. Hartman nailed it. I have one foot in the practitioner camp and one foot in the academic camp, and that makes me suspect in both camps. When I read on Facebook that a former student is having a hard time, I will post, always in your corner. When a current student was going through hard times, I would give them a so what card to suggest that in the greater scheme of things, maybe matters weren't so bad. The worst semester in my 31 years at CMU was the fall of 2001. The tragic 9/11 cast a pall over the students. They walked around with their heads down, wondering if they had a future. One student had to wait 12 hours to find out that her sister assigned to the Pentagon was safe. Another student of Arab American heritage was berated by others that day because of the attack. For several weeks, classes began with a discussion of 9/11 and its aftermath. Finally, after Thanksgiving, things started to return to normal around here, but it was an incredibly difficult semester. In the first of my 6.5 unpublished novels, I based a character on T.J. Buchholz. T.J. was not happy when I gave him a copy of the manuscript, and he found out that the character was offed. In my 4th unpublished novel, I asked Adam Graham and his pal Andy Moore to select the names for the characters modeled after them. Graham picked Gray, and Andrew picked Hank, but they weren't all. Acting on rumors 2 decades ago that the CMU president at the time was holding faculty sacrifices in the bell tower of Warner Hall, I organized a student expedition to report on what was going on the 6th floor of Moore Hall, to investigate. The provost let us in, but we only made it to the 4th floor. We left sticky notes of thanks on his office door that the janitors did not appreciate. Right, Todd and Aaron? The police questioned us afterwards, but they let us go with a smile. We were, after all, harmless. 10 years later, we reprised the expedition, but we only got to the 3rd floor. No police that time. There were times that I asked advertising students to dress up as their favorite advertising characters for Halloween. I would wear my Richard Nixon mask and scare the crap out of them. There were 2 visits and 2 campus-wide speeches by Tom Curley, the president of USA Today, who granted me full rights to use copyrighted materials for my 2 books about USA Today for no charge, and charged CMU nothing for his expenses. My love of the speaker series is well known. Who can forget CMU's own nationally award-winning sportscaster, the late great Dick Enberg, speaking to a standing room-owned crowd in Warner Auditorium in 1988. He received a 10-minute standing ovation before his speech. The late great newspaper columnist Molly Ivan came to town one February. It was colder than hell. I lent her my winter coat. She declared her independence by smoking in front of the no smoking sign in the stairwell of Anspaugh, and drank us under the table at the Bird afterward. The late great author Neil Postman, of Amusing Ourselves to Death fame, an academic hero of mine who was always talked about in my classes, came and spoke at Warner. I got his autograph. And Mike Wallace came late in his career. A student in one of my classes got his autograph and demanded that I accept it. I reluctantly did. The student said, "He was your hero. I know you want his autograph." And Wallace was my hero, and so was that student. I reveled in showing senior students the movie Network, the movie Murrow, the movie All the President's Men, and the HBO series The Newsroom. I would usually cry at some point during those movies because moral journalists who stand up for the right bring me to tears. Other favorite visuals were Max Headroom, Page One, The Image Makers, Advertising, A 60-Second Seduction, The Persuaders, and The Social Network. And then there was The Lurch. I'll let Adam Graham explain that. And there were the many tennis matches I played with students over the years. At the Bird on a good night, a student would ask me what songs I wanted to hear. I would hand them a list and some cash, and the student would program the high-tech jukebox. And there were the names I had for favorite students, such as the right Bauer, my nickname for Garrett Ellison. The left Bauer, Mike Hoffman, is not able to attend tonight, rocking and rolling somewhere, I'm guessing. I used to begin each class with what students began to call my monologue. I would carry in a handful of clippings and printouts of what was new in journalism and the media world to share with students, with a discussion to follow. Another tradition I developed was designating the last class meeting of the semester as the time for students to ask me a question about anything. I was only stumped once. That question may come up later this evening, and I might answer it this time. From time to time, I would invite former students back to class to share what it was like in the outside world. I am indebted to many of you who have come back, so to speak, to give back. Chad Livengood was a stellar editor of CM Live, who sought my advice rather than running from it. He has fashioned a stellar career as a political journalist. I was able to join him in the ranks in 2008 when we both covered the Democratic National Convention in Denver when Barack Obama was nominated. I had a once-in-a-lifetime experience as a picketer when the faculty had a brief strike several years ago. When students would come to my office for counseling and had no clue about what they want to do with their lives, I would break the ice by saying, if you were the ruler of the universe, what job would you give yourself? You have to answer that question. It occurred to me long ago that being a college professor was like going through college again, only this time being popular. More than once, a female student would ask me to meet her boyfriend. I did. One asked me to give her boyfriend, an engineering student at MSU, career advice. I did. They have 6 kids now. I used to write poetry in my reporter's notebooks at the Bird on Wednesday night when the going was slow. I filled 27 of them. Later I transcribed them and presented 4 nights of poetry at the Kai Coffee House. They were called monologues. My monologues. Halfway through my career, a student asked me on the last day of class what I would do if I were president of CMU, having heard me criticize the current president once or twice. I went off on a 60-minute, non-stop, head-emptying rant of what I would do differently as CMU chief. After class, I hastily wrote down what I could recall and presented my thoughts from time to time to students on the last day of class, updating along the way. In planning my farewell address to CMU in 2015, I decided to do one final revision of what I would do as president and present it. And I did, wearing scrubs in a satirical nod to the CMU Medical School. I am deeply touched by the former students in attendance tonight. As they know, I have been and always will be willing to go to great lengths to help them. None of this would have been possible without the loving and understanding family that I have been blessed with. They sacrificed my absence 3 days a week for the better part of 3 decades. My wife, Kay, of 51 years, our beloved daughters, Kim, Alicia, and Jackie, their husbands, Jeremy, Jason, and John, and our grandchildren, Isaac, Ian, Adam, Ella, Aiden, Samantha, and Paige. My older sister, and I'm happy to have my older sister, Ruth Hartman Moore, and her husband, Bill Moore, and Bill's sister and my high school classmate, Becky Moore, with us this evening. All the way from Colorado. Without my family, I would be nobody from nowhere. Once upon a time, in the dungeon-like basement of Anspaugh Hall, in the airy penthouse of Moore Hall, I taught students to be journalists, how to report and write, to be fair, how to do their research, how to ask good questions, how to use words wisely, what I am endeavoring to do tonight. And I tried to teach them to become people of integrity. As my mentor at Bowling Green State University, the late great professor of communication Raymond K. Tucker would say, do right. Because of all of you, and hundreds more out there somewhere, and sometimes in spite of myself, I am joining the CMU Journalism Hall of Fame, for which I will always be grateful. Oh, and I'm buying the first round tonight at Cheers.